Commander Alan Wright stood frozen on the bridge of the U.S. Valiant. His eyes were fixed on the main screen where 12 massive ships hung against the blackness of space. They had appeared 3 days ago at the edge of Neptune's orbit. No warning, no communication. They simply arrived. "Any response to our messages yet?" Alan asked, his voice tight. Communications Officer Megan Taylor shook her head. "Nothing, sir. We've tried all frequencies, all known protocols. They're receiving our signals, but they're not answering." Alan ran a hand through his short brown hair. 6 months ago, he had been patrolling the asteroid belt for smugglers. Now he commanded Earth's first true warship, facing the first confirmed alien contact in human history. The Valiant was humanity's pride, a marvel of technology and firepower. But compared to those alien vessels, it might as well have been a rowboat. "Commander," called Lisa Pearson from the science station, "I'm getting some unusual readings from the alien fleet." Ellen walked over to her station. Lisa was the ship's head scientist, recruited from NASA after discovering patterns in deep space radiation that suggested intelligent origin. Her theories had been proven right in the most dramatic way possible. "What kind of readings?" he asked. Lisa's fingers danced across her console. "Energy signatures unlike anything in our database. Their power output is, well, it's hard to calculate exactly, but conservative estimates put it at least 50 years beyond our current technology." "Weapons capability." Lisa's face grew grim. "If those are weapon ports along their hulls, and I'm 95% certain they are, then a single ship could likely destroy our entire fleet." The bridge fell silent. The United Earth Defense Force had 15 ships scattered throughout the solar system. All of them together wouldn't stand a chance. "Sir," Megan called suddenly, "we're receiving a transmission from the lead alien vessel." "On screen," Alan ordered, straightening his uniform. The view screen flickered, and a face appeared. The alien had bluish-gray skin with ridges where eyebrows would be on a human. Its eyes were large and entirely black, with no visible pupils or whites. When it spoke, its mouth moved in ways that didn't match the words they heard. "Greetings, people of Earth. I am High Commander Zex Toll of the Taraxian Dominion. We have been observing your civilization for some time. We wish to establish formal relations with your world." Alan took a deep breath. "This is Commander Alan Wright of the United Earth Defense Force vessel Valiant. On behalf of Earth, we welcome you to our solar system and look forward to peaceful exchange." The alien made a gesture that might have been a nod. "We request a meeting with your leaders to discuss humanity's place in the galactic community. Our sensors indicate your planet has achieved sufficient technological advancement to warrant attention." Something about the way Zex Toll said "attention" made Alan's skin crawl. "I will relay your request to Earth Central Command," Alan replied carefully. 3 days later, Alan stood at attention in the United Nations headquarters in New York as a delegation of Exaraxians met with Earth's highest officials. Admiral Susan Carter, the head of Earth's military forces, had insisted on a display of human defensive capabilities as a gesture of good faith. "As you can see," Admiral Carter explained, gesturing to holographic displays of Earth's weapon systems, "we have developed significant defensive technology." The Exaraxian representatives exchanged glances. One of them made a sound that their translation devices didn't catch, but it seemed suspiciously like a snicker. High Commander Zex Toll spoke smoothly. "Most impressive for a species so young. Your weapons are quite inventive, though rather quaint by galactic standards." Admiral Carter's smile remained fixed, but Alan saw her jaw tighten. "We look forward to learning from more advanced civilizations," she replied diplomatically. "And we are eager to teach," Zex Toll said. His black eyes reflected the lights of the room, giving nothing away. "I believe our interactions will be most educational for your people." Alan watched from the side of the room, a cold feeling settling in his stomach. Despite the pleasant words, something felt wrong. The way the aliens looked at the human technology, not with curiosity or respect, but with barely disguised amusement, reminded him of how European explorers once regarded indigenous peoples before colonizing their lands. As the meeting continued, Alan caught Lisa's eye across the room. The scientist gave him a subtle nod, confirming she felt it too. The Exoraxians hadn't come to make friends. They had come to assess a potential conquest. 3 weeks passed with daily meetings between Earth officials and the Exoraxian delegation. The aliens set up a base on the moon, claiming it was to minimize cultural contamination. Earth governments scrambled to present a united front, but behind closed doors, arguments raged about how much technology to share with the visitors. Today was the day Earth would show off its most advanced weapon system. Admiral Carter had pushed hard for this presentation, despite objections from several nations. "We need to show strength," she had argued. "They already think we're primitive. If we appear too weak, we're asking to be conquered." The meeting took place in a large underground facility in Nevada. Jack Monroe paced nervously behind the stage. As chief engineer of Project Slingshot, he had spent 7 years developing what he believed was humanity's most promising defense system. "Relax," said his assistant Diane Wells, checking the presentation slides one last time. "Your design is brilliant." Jack ran a hand through his thinning hair. "Brilliant by human standards. These aliens cross galaxies like we cross streets." "Which is exactly why Slingshot might work," Diane replied. "Sometimes the simplest ideas are the most effective." On stage, Admiral Carter was finishing her introduction. "And now, I present Chief Engineer Jack Monroe, who will demonstrate our kinetic energy weapon system, Project Slingshot." Jack walked onto the stage, feeling the eyes of 6 Exoraxians on him. Their black, pupilless eyes gave away nothing, but their posture seemed relaxed, almost bored. "Thank you, Admiral," Jack began. "Project Slingshot draws inspiration from one of humanity's oldest weapons, the slingshot, but applies the principle at cosmic scale." He activated the holographic display, showing a network of platforms in Earth orbit. These platforms use magnetic acceleration rails to launch small projectiles. The projectiles then use gravity assists from the moon and planets to increase speed, eventually reaching nearly 1% of light speed. At these velocities, even a small tungsten rod carries enormous kinetic energy. Jack continued explaining the technical details, how the system used minimal energy by leveraging natural gravitational forces, how it could strike targets anywhere in the solar system, how the projectiles were nearly impossible to detect until impact. As he spoke, he noticed something odd. The Exoraxians were making small movements. Their shoulders trembled slightly. One covered its mouth briefly. They were laughing at him. High Commander Zex Toll finally raised a hand. "Forgive the interruption, Engineer Monroe. You are suggesting that your species' most advanced weapon is throwing rocks." A ripple of translator-delayed laughter spread through the Exoraxian delegation. Jack felt his face grow hot. "Not rocks. Precisely engineered tungsten rods accelerated tow." Yes. Zex Toll waved dismissively. "Projectile weapons. We abandoned such primitive approaches millennia ago. Our youngest children play with more sophisticated technology." The lead Exoraxian turned to Admiral Carter. "Even your civilian vessels would require shields far beyond what your species could achieve to withstand our standard weapons. Yet you present us with throwing sticks." Jack stood frozen on stage as the aliens laughed openly now. Admiral Carter's face remained professionally blank, but her eyes flashed with anger. "Perhaps," she said coolly, "you would care to demonstrate your superior technology." At the back of the room, Olivia Green, Earth's chief diplomatic officer, watched with growing concern. While everyone focused on the humiliating exchange on stage, she noticed something troubling. When the aliens thought no humans were watching, their body language changed. The mockery seemed forced, almost theatrical. And several times, she caught Zex Toll making subtle hand signals to his subordinates during Jack's presentation. They were recording everything, taking notes, far more interested than they pretended to be. Later that evening, In her private office, Olivia reviewed footage of all meetings with the Taraxians. She noticed patterns, specific questions they asked repeatedly about Earth's infrastructure, population centers, military capabilities. Their dismissive attitude seemed designed to make humans underestimate their interest. She picked up her secure phone and dialed Admiral Carter's private line. "Admiral, it's Olivia Green. I need to meet with you immediately. I don't think our visitors are being honest about their intentions." "Go on," said Carter. "I believe they're gathering intelligence for something other than peaceful relations, and I think they're deliberately making us feel inferior so we'll reveal more than we should." There was a pause on the line. "Meet me in 1 hour," Carter said finally, "and bring everything you have." As Olivia gathered her evidence, across the base, Jack Monroe sat alone in his lab, staring at his slingshot designs. Despite the humiliation, something bothered him about the aliens' reaction. If Slingshot was truly as primitive as they claimed, why had they asked so many detailed questions about its targeting systems? Paul Rodriguez yawned as he stared at the satellite data streaming across his monitor. Working the night shift at the global monitoring station wasn't exciting, but it paid well. Most nights he just watched weather patterns and space debris, reporting anything unusual to his supervisors. Tonight, however, something caught his eye. "That's weird," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. The energy readings from the Caraxian moonbase were spiking in an unusual pattern. He had been watching the aliens for weeks now, and they always maintained constant energy levels during their rest cycle. He picked up his phone and called Samantha Kelly, the military intelligence officer assigned to his station. "Sam, you need to see this," he said when she answered. "The aliens are up to something." 20 minutes later, Samantha stood behind Paul's chair, her face grim as she watched the data. "Can you decode any of this?" she asked. Paul shook his head. "It's all encrypted, but look at the pattern." He pointed to a series of pulses. "That's a communication signal, and it's aimed at their fleet, not at their homeworld. Why would they need to send so much data to ships that are just sitting there?" Samantha's eyes narrowed. "Record everything. I need to make some calls." By morning, a small team had gathered in a secure room beneath the Pentagon. Admiral Carter stood at the head of the table, with Olivia Green, Jack Monroe, Lisa Pearson, and Samantha Kelly seated around her. "The evidence is mounting," Samantha said, showing them Paul's data. "The Caraxians are transmitting massive amounts of information to their fleet. We believe they're sharing everything they've learned about our defenses." Olivia nodded in agreement. "Their diplomatic behavior matches known patterns of deception. They ask the same questions in different ways, focusing heavily on our military capabilities while pretending not to care." "They laughed at Project Slingshot," Jack added. "But afterward, they asked very specific questions about its targeting system and deployment timeline." Admiral Carter's face was stone. "Lisa, what's your assessment?" Lisa Pearson tapped her tablet, bringing up a series of calculations. "Based on energy readings from their ships, I believe they're charging weapon systems. Slowly, to avoid detection, but the power curve is unmistakable. I estimate they'll reach full capacity in approximately 7 days." The room fell silent as the implication sank in. "They're planning an attack," Admiral Carter said finally. "They never came for peace talks. This was reconnaissance." Jack cleared his throat. "Admiral, I need to tell you something about Slingshot. After their mockery, I went back to my lab and reviewed all our data on Caraxian technology. There's something odd about their shield harmonics." He pulled up a diagram showing wave patterns. "Their shields operate on a frequency that changes predictably. It's advanced, but it has a weakness. If we time our kinetic projectiles to hit exactly between frequency shifts, we might be able to penetrate their defenses." "How could you know this?" Samantha asked skeptically. "Because they showed us," Jack replied. "During the technology exchange, they demonstrated their shield systems, probably thinking our sensors couldn't detect the harmonic patterns. But Diane caught it. He gestured to his assistant, who had been quietly taking notes. Diane Wells looked up. It was a small thing. They were so confident we couldn't understand their technology that they got sloppy. But once we saw the pattern, we could calculate the timing. Admiral Carter leaned forward. Can Slingshot be modified to exploit this weakness? Jack nodded slowly. Yes, but we'd need to deploy the platforms immediately. And we'd have to do it secretly, or they'll change their shield frequencies. That violates our agreement with the Exaraxians, Olivia pointed out. We promised not to deploy weapons during negotiations. They're already violating the agreement by planning an attack, Samantha countered. Admiral Carter stood up. I'll take this to the President. In the meantime, Jack, prepare Slingshot for emergency deployment. Lisa, continue monitoring their fleet. Samantha, I want round-the-clock surveillance on all Xeraxian communications. Olivia, keep them busy with diplomacy. Request additional meetings. Ask complex questions that take time to answer. As they filed out of the room, Jack caught up with Diane in the hallway. We were right all along, he said quietly. A simple idea, executed perfectly, beats complex technology. Diane smiled grimly. Let's just hope they keep underestimating us long enough for us to prove it. On the 7th day of secret preparations, the Xeraxians ended all pretense. Their delegation arrived at the United Nations headquarters without warning. High Commander Zex Toll no longer wore the friendly expression he had maintained during previous meetings. People of Earth, he announced to the hastily assembled world leaders. The Xeraxian Dominion has assessed your civilization and found it worthy of inclusion in our empire. A murmur went through the room. Olivia Green, seated near the back, exchanged glances with Admiral Carter. Inclusion? Asked the UN Secretary-General. I'm afraid I don't understand. Zex Toll's mouth formed what might have been a smile, but it didn't reach his eyes. Earth will become a protectorate under Xeraxian rule. Your resources and labor will serve the greater needs of our empire. In exchange, you will receive our protection and limited access to our technology. And if we decline this generous offer? Admiral Carter asked, her voice calm despite the tension in the room. Decline? Zex Toll made a sound like breaking glass, apparently Xeraxian laughter. This is not an offer, Admiral. This is your new reality. Our fleet is already moving into position. Your primitive weapons cannot harm us. Resistance would only result in unnecessary destruction. On the main display screen, satellite images showed the 12 Xeraxian warships moving toward Earth, spreading out to cover major population centers. You have 6 hours to announce your surrender to your people, Zex Toll continued. After that, we will begin removing any military assets that might pose even a minor inconvenience to our occupation forces. As the alien delegation exited, leaving stunned silence behind them, Zex Toll paused beside Admiral Carter. I particularly enjoyed your engineer's presentation of the slingshot device, he said quietly. Throwing rocks in space. Such charming but useless ingenuity. Perhaps we will keep some of your scientists as curiosities. The moment the Xeraxians left the building, the room erupted in panicked voices. Admiral Carter moved quickly to the podium. Everyone, quiet, she shouted. The room fell silent. We anticipated this. Operation Last Stand is already in motion. All nations must immediately begin civilian evacuations to designated shelter areas. You knew this was coming, demanded the Chinese representative. We suspected, Carter replied, and we've been preparing. But I need unanimous approval right now to activate all defense systems, including those deployed against the terms of our agreement with the Xeraxians. Within 30 minutes, the vote was complete. Earth would fight. In his underground facility in the Rocky Mountains, Jack Monroe received the authorization code. His hands trembled slightly as he unlocked the final safety protocols on the Slingshot network. Diane stood beside him, her face pale but determined. Initiating startup sequence, Jack announced to his team. Platform 1, power at 30% and rising. Around Earth, and the moon, 23 hidden platforms began powering up. Each contained a magnetic accelerator capable of launching tungsten rods along predetermined paths. The projectiles would build momentum slowly, looping through the solar system's gravitational fields before achieving their final devastating velocity. "Time to first potential impact?" asked General Frank Harris, who had been assigned to oversee the operation. 4 hours, 17 minutes, Diane replied. "The projectiles need time to accelerate." "Cutting it close," the general muttered. Jack looked up from his console. "We've programmed the timing to match their shield frequencies, but if they detect the projectiles and change their patterns—" "They won't," General Harris said firmly. "They don't believe we can hurt them. That's our advantage." Across the globe, military forces scrambled to defensive positions even as civilians rushed to underground shelters. In orbiting space stations, non-essential personnel evacuated to Earth while skeleton crews prepared for battle. Commander Alan Wright stood on the bridge of the U.S. Valiant, watching as his small fleet of Earth ships formed a defensive perimeter around the planet. 15 ships against 12 alien vessels that could each destroy them all. "Status report," he ordered. "All ships in position," reported his first officer. "Weapons charge. But, sir, our simulations show our conventional weapons won't even dent their shields." Alan nodded grimly. "I know. We're not here to win, Lieutenant. We're here to distract them while Slingshot gets into position." On the main screen, the Xeraxian warships continued their approach, weapons visibly charging. From one of them, a transmission came through. "Attention Earth vessels," said High Commander Zextal. "Your primitive ships amuse us. Surrender now, and we will allow your crews to live as servants. Resist, and be destroyed." Ellen took a deep breath and opened the channel to respond. Everything now depended on buying enough time for Jack's dumb weapon to save them all. The first shots were fired 3 hours after the Xeraxian ultimatum. A small Earth fighter squadron approached the alien fleet in what appeared to be a foolish attack run. The Xeraxians responded with casual energy bursts that tore through 3 human ships instantly. In the Rocky Mountain facility, Jack Monroe watched the battle unfold on his monitors. Each loss felt like a physical blow, but he forced himself to focus on the slingshot controls. "Projectile 1 at 40% of final velocity," Diane reported. "Projectiles 2 through 7 accelerating on schedule." Jack nodded grimly. The first tungsten rod had completed its second gravity assist around the moon and was now building speed in a controlled fall toward Earth, where it would slingshot around the planet before heading toward its target, the Xeraxian command ship. "Can they detect the projectiles?" General Harris asked, pacing behind them. "Not yet," Jack answered. "The rods are too small and cold to register on standard sensors. At this velocity, they just look like space dust." He checked another readout. "But that will change when they hit final approach speed." In orbit, the battle intensified. Commander Wright directed his ships in an elaborate dance, keeping just out of range of the aliens' most powerful weapons, while making hit-and-run attacks that did no real damage but demanded attention. "U.S. Dauntless is hit," called out Megan from communications. "Captain Ellis reports heavy damage, but they're staying in the fight." Alan gripped his command chair tightly. "Tell all ships to maintain attack pattern Delta. We need to keep them focused on us for another hour." On his science station, Lisa Pearson studied incoming data from the alien ships. "Commander, I'm detecting something interesting. When they fire their main weapons, their shield harmonics shift temporarily. They're diverting power." Ellen moved to her station. "Can you predict the pattern?" "I think so," Lisa said, fingers flying across her console. "It's a complex cycle, but there's definitely a pattern. I'm sending this to the slingshot team now." In the Rocky Mountain base, Jack received Lisa's data and immediately saw its importance. "This changes everything," he said, quickly adjusting his calculations. "They've been hiding their true shield patterns. When they fire, there's a microsecond vulnerability we didn't know about. Can we exploit it?" asked General Harris. Jack nodded, already reprogramming the projectile timing. Yes, but we'll need to coordinate with the fleet. The aliens need to be firing their weapons at the exact moment our rods hit. First projectile, at 60% of final velocity, Diane announced. Estimated time to impact, 47 minutes. Across the globe, the situation was growing desperate. Xeraxian ships had begun selective strikes against military installations. The U.S. Intrepid, Earth's newest destroyer, exploded in a ball of flame when it tried to defend a ground base in Australia. Civilian casualties were still low thanks to the evacuation, but Earth's military was being systematically dismantled. High Commander Zex Toll broadcast his message across all frequencies. Your resistance is both futile and annoying. Surrender now, and we will limit further destruction. In response, Admiral Carter authorized a coordinated attack by all remaining Earth forces. It was a desperate move that everyone knew wouldn't succeed, but it wasn't meant to. It was meant to make the Xeraxians fire all their weapons at once. Jack watched the timer counting down. Projectile 1 at 87% of final velocity. All other projectiles on trajectory. Admiral Carter's attack begins in 3 minutes. Will it work? Diane asked quietly so only Jack could hear. He looked at her, his face showing both doubt and determination. The math works. The physics works. Everything else is just hope. In orbit, Commander Wright received the attack order and relayed it to his remaining ships. All vessels, this is Commander Wright. On my mark, execute attack pattern Omega. Target the command ship with everything we've got. He took a deep breath. Whatever happens next, it has been my honor to serve with you all. The bridge crew of the Valiant stood a little straighter at his words. They all knew this might be their final action. Lisa looked up from her station. Commander, Projectile 1 has just reached 95% of final velocity. It's now moving fast enough that the Xeraxians might detect it soon. Ellen nodded. Then we don't have a moment to lose. All ships, attack now. Earth's remaining fleet surged forward, weapons blazing, directly toward the heart of the Xeraxian formation. The aliens responded exactly as hoped, all ships firing simultaneously at the humans' seemingly suicidal charge. And in that moment, the first slingshot projectile reached its final devastating speed, a tiny rod of tungsten moving at nearly 1% the speed of light, aimed at the exact point where the command ship shields would flicker during weapons discharge. The Xeraxian command ship fired its main weapon, a beam of bright purple energy that sliced through 2 Earth vessels instantly. High Commander Zex Toll watched with satisfaction as the primitive human ships scattered before his fleet's power. Their attack had been brave but foolish. Now they would learn the price of defiance. Status of Earth's defensive capabilities. He asked his second-in-command. 70% degraded, High Commander. Their orbital weapons are disabled, and most of their ships are destroyed or crippled. Ground defenses remain but pose no threat to our vessels. Zex Toll nodded. Begin preparations for ground troops. I want their major cities secured within. An alarm blared on the bridge. One of the sensor operators called out in their language, voice rising with confusion. High Commander, small object approaching at extreme velocity. Debris from their destroyed ships, Zex Toll said dismissively. Ignore it. But sir, its trajectory is. The rest of the sentence was never finished. The first slingshot projectile, a tungsten rod barely the size of a human forearm, struck the command ship precisely when its shields flickered during weapons discharge. Moving at nearly 3,000 kilometers per second, the rod carried kinetic energy equivalent to a small nuclear weapon. It punched through the momentarily weakened shields and tore through the ship from bow to stern. The Xeraxian command vessel didn't explode dramatically. Instead, it simply came apart, splitting into 2 uneven pieces that began drifting in opposite directions, venting atmosphere and bodies into space. In the Rocky Mountain facility, a cheer went up as sensors confirmed the hit. Direct impact. Diane shouted, grabbing Jack's arm. Their command ship is destroyed. Jack allowed himself only a moment of celebration before turning back to his console. Projectiles 2 and 3 approaching final velocity, targeting second and third largest vessels in the alien fleet. On the bridge of the U.S. Valiant, the crew stared in stunned silence at their view screens. The enormous Thoraxian command ship, which had seemed invincible moments before, was now 2 chunks of useless metal. "What just happened?" asked Lieutenant Greg Foster, his voice barely above a whisper. Lisa Pearson looked up from her science station, a smile spreading across her face. "Slingshot just happened. The dumb weapon worked." Commander Wright opened a channel to the remaining Earth ships. "All vessels, regroup and hold position. Slingshot is operational. I repeat, Slingshot is operational." The remaining Thoraxian ships seemed frozen in confusion. Their neat formation broke apart as individual captains tried to understand what had just destroyed their command ship. Several began scanning space around them, finally detecting the approaching projectiles. Frantic communications flew between the alien vessels. Their shields began changing patterns rapidly, trying to adapt to this unexpected threat. 2 ships fired at the incoming projectiles, but hitting something so small moving so fast proved impossible. The second slingshot rod struck its target 30 seconds later. This time, the Thoraxian vessel exploded spectacularly, its power core destabilized by the impact. The explosion damaged 2 nearby alien ships, weakening their shields. "They're panicking," Jack said, watching the alien fleet's movements. "Their shield patterns are becoming erratic. They're trying to adapt but don't know exactly what they're adapting to." General Harris leaned over the console. "Can they stop the projectiles?" "Not the ones already at speed," Jack replied. "Physics is physics. Once something has that much momentum, it doesn't stop for anything." The third and fourth projectiles hit within moments of each other. One struck perfectly, destroying another Thoraxian ship instantly. The other glanced off strengthened shields but still caused significant damage. In orbit, the Thoraxian fleet began to retreat, moving away from Earth as quickly as possible. But the slingshot projectiles, traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, were already locked on their trajectories. "They're running," Commander Wright observed, watching the alien ships flee. "They don't understand what's happening." "Of course they don't," Lisa replied. "They were so focused on energy weapons and exotic technology that they never considered the simplest solution. Objects in motion stay in motion, especially when they're moving really, really fast." Another alien ship exploded as the 5th projectile found its mark. The remaining Thoraxians increased their speed, but 7 more projectiles were already on their way, too fast to outrun, too small to shoot down, and too powerful to survive. High Commander Zextal's final transmission was picked up by Earth's communication array. How is this possible? They're just throwing rocks." Jack Monroe, hearing this in the control center, allowed himself a small smile as he whispered, "Sometimes the oldest ideas are the best ones." 3 weeks after the battle, Jack Monroe stood at a podium in front of the United Nations. The room was packed with world leaders, military officials, and press from every nation. Above him hung a twisted piece of Thoraxian hull metal, a reminder of humanity's unlikely victory. "The slingshot system worked because of its simplicity," Jack explained, his voice stronger and more confident than it had been before the invasion. "The Thoraxians were looking for advanced energy weapons or exotic technology. They never considered that basic physics could defeat them." He pressed a button, and a hologram appeared showing a tungsten rod in flight. These projectiles were just 15 inches long and 3 inches wide. But when accelerated to nearly 1% of light speed, each carried the kinetic energy of a small nuclear weapon. Admiral Carter stepped up next to him. "That's why Project Slingshot succeeded where conventional weapons failed. No shield can violate the laws of physics. Mass times velocity equals force. Simple as that." In the audience, Diane Wells smiled proudly. She had turned down 3 job offers from private aerospace companies to continue working with Jack on the expanded Slingshot network. After the ceremony, Commander Alan Wright and Lisa Pearson stood in the memorial garden outside, where small stone markers honored the crews of 7 Earth ships lost in the battle. "I still can't believe we won," Alan said quietly. "When I saw those alien ships for the first time, I thought it was the end." Lisa nodded. "That's what saved us." They thought the same thing. They were so confident in their superiority that they didn't take our primitive weapons seriously until it was too late. Across the solar system, in the darkness beyond Mars, the 3 surviving Soraxian ships limped toward deep space. Their engines were damaged, their crews decimated, and their confidence shattered. They transmitted continuous warnings back to their homeworld about the deadly humans and their simple but devastating weapons. 1 month later, Samantha Kelly presented her intelligence report to the newly formed Earth Defense Council. "We've intercepted and decoded multiple Soraxian transmissions," she explained. "Earth has been classified as extremely dangerous in their databases. They've declared our entire solar system a no-entry zone." Paul Rodriguez, who had been promoted for his discovery of the alien communications, added, "Their scientists still don't fully understand how we defeated them. They're completely rethinking their shield designs." General Harris leaned forward. "Will they come back?" "Eventually, perhaps," Samantha replied. "But not soon. And next time, they won't underestimate us." 6 months after the invasion, Jack Monroe showed Olivia Green around the new Slingshot Control Center built into Cheyenne Mountain. "We've expanded the network throughout the solar system," he explained. 50 platforms now, with more under construction. Each can launch up to 20 projectiles. Olivia studied the display showing the platforms scattered from Mercury to Neptune, and we shared this technology with everyone. Jack nodded. "Every nation has access. After what happened, Earth stands united in defense, if nothing else." They stepped into a large viewing room where engineers were studying recovered Soraxian technology. In the center stood Admiral Carter with a group of international officials. "The aliens' biggest mistake wasn't technological," the Admiral was saying. "It was assuming that advanced always means complex. Sometimes the simplest solution is the most effective." 5 years later, Commander Wright, now Admiral Wright, stood on the observation deck of the rebuilt U.S. Valiant, watching as workers put the finishing touches on Earth's first true interstellar vessel. The ship was named Unity, a symbol of Earth's new cooperative spirit born from the invasion. Lisa Pearson joined him at the window. "She's beautiful," she said, "and armed with the most advanced slingshot system we've ever built." Ellen smiled. "Advanced, yet simple. The perfect human combination." Below them, Earth gleamed blue and green in the sunlight. Around it orbited the sentinels of the Slingshot network, humanity's dumb weapon that had proven smarter than all the technological marvels of an interstellar empire. In deep space, alien civilizations now whispered warnings about the humans, a young species that had defeated the mighty Soraxian dominion with little more than rocks and a good understanding of physics. Sometimes, the oldest ideas truly were the best ones.